Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll just jump in, and then Catherine will let people in as they arrive. And Catherine, there is somebody who should be showing up in maybe 15 to 20 minutes. So if you can just keep an eye on that, that'd be awesome.
I'll keep an eye on all that. Don't worry about that.
Thank you. Otherwise, Katja, meet Erin. Erin, meet Katja. Nice. And if you're okay, we'll just jump right in. And so, welcome. This is I'm calling this the Human Advantage series, which I'm really excited about for 2026. Today, we're going to be talking about why your brand voice is your superpower. I have two guests with me today. I've got Katja Pischel. Did I say that right, Katja?
You did.
I don't hear your last name very often.
You did.
Okay. So Katja is the founder of Bridge Builder for Change, where she accompanies senior female leaders from corporate in building and growing their own coaching or consulting business. As Germany's top personal branding expert, she has helped women leaders and entrepreneurs since 2019 build a strong personal brand, clarify their positioning, and develop scalable offers for visibility, impact, and growth. And we have Erin and her team, well, just Erin today, but Erin and her team at Audacious Labs are experts in behavioral science-based course design, helping learning experiences drive real and measurable behavior change. With over 20 years of experience designing high-impact experiences for some of the world's biggest brands, and having generated over $20 million in custom course sales to corporate L&D leaders, she knows exactly what makes a learning product successful, whether it's built for businesses or sold directly to consumers. And I am Steph. I run Clarity Web Design Studio. I help service-based founders build websites that actually work for real people. So today's topic is really close to my heart because I see this voice thing play out on websites all the time. So we're just going to dive in. So I'm going to start with something that I think a lot of us have felt. Maybe some of us who are in the online industry probably see it maybe a little bit more than other folks do, and maybe we haven't said it out loud. But there is more content online than ever, and it pretty much all starts to sound identical. So I'm wondering what you two are seeing in your different sections of the market as well as sections of the world, and what happens when businesses start to lose their real voice. And you can jump in anytime. It's a casual conversation.
Yeah. Katja, do you want to start like from a brand standpoint, and then I can go into like what it starts to look like at the product level?
Yes, okay? Certainly. Well, first of all, when I speak through the lens of female coaches and consultants mainly, and what I've seen for sure over the last 9 months or so is what you just mentioned, Steph, that there is I always call it like a content explosion. So people who weren't visible now can, with the help of AI, just throw out content at an enormous speed and frequency. And what that does, if you look at it from a potential customer's point of view, what I really see is that the amount of content that people get really bombarded with leads to what I call high ignorability. And I think that plays to everything sort of sounding the same. What it also does, it really reduces trust, like massively, because people don't know any longer what they can believe or what they can believe. They don't know what is real. And this is true for pictures. We've come to a point where this is true for pictures on social media. This is true for texts on websites and social media posts. And that really, as I said, it reduces trust. People honestly get bored. And on a buyer side, it delays decisions, because if people don't trust, they don't make decisions. But what I also see happening in the work with my clients, so with female business owners, is that selling has become harder. And it really, like this constant seeing others being online basically all the time, it really increases stress and also anxiety. And I don't know about you, what you observe in your business, but I know a fair amount of women who are at a point where they, if they could, they'd stop being online on social media. They would rather stop today than, just playing that game longer. And from a brand perspective, people are just exhausted, and I see that, and I'm sure we dive into this, I see that happening when you communicate in a voice or a tone that just isn't truly yours, and you're trying to, maybe copy too much of what is out there already, just because it seems so easy and it goes so fast. That's what I'm seeing.
And do you think that it is actually easy, or do you think that we're just being told that it's so easy and that we should?
I don't think it's easy. I mean, obviously, AI can do beautiful things, and I've been in tech for over 20 years. I'm a huge fan. So on the one side, it is easy, but on the other side, it's not, because using AI to create your content might lead you to a point where you almost stop thinking and almost stop, bringing in your unique point of view, your unique convictions. And this is what makes it so boring, because this is missing, right? It's not an AI problem. It's that we stop taking a stand and speaking our opinions. This is what I think makes it so boring.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, both in terms of what I see with my clients, but also how I approach it in my business. Over the summer, I started posting 6 days a week on LinkedIn, and like a really massive, effort for branding. And so, Katja, when you were saying it's not easy, like it's not easy, whether, whatever channels you're using. Even if you're showing at that local networking events, like it is not easy, and consistency is really important. And I think we need to remember that when it comes to our audience's attention, we're competing with Netflix, we're competing with their Slack pings, we're competing with their kids, texting them, or their mother needing something. And so to get them to stop the scroll, whether it's literally they're scrolling or they're just working through their inbox, is we have to be very intentional about creating a glitch in their brain, really like jarring them out of what they're expecting to see, which you can do through voice, you can do through your visuals. There's different ways to do that, but I've found that to effectively do that, we have to start leveraging the science of attention and the psychology of how people make decisions about their time in a very intentional way. So it can no longer be that your social media content or the content you send out in your newsletter is more visually aesthetic than anybody else. Like, you have to hack the brain now, which is fun depending on what you like to learn about in life. But like it's essential, the glitch. And I think it's better to do less and do it well than to lose your voice in that, because as someone who writes content, so much content, it's really easy to lose your voice in that. And I've been through that cycle, and it comes up again for me. And there's a lot that plays into that. And we all want to use tech to make us as fast and efficient and smart as possible. And so it's like this balance of speed, because that's reality we're all working in as business owners, but also slowing down enough to notice if you are differentiated in your voice, if you are differentiated in your visuals, or in the case of like creating a course or something, like, are you differentiated in your framework, your IP, those types of things. So yeah, that's a few thoughts.
That's really cool. So like, do you think then that using these tools, because part of their appeal is that they make you so much faster, but like Katja was saying, it's like your critical thinking skills have to be doubled to when you're using them, because you can't just sort of put out what they say, you have to edit it. Like I was talking to somebody earlier today, and we were griping about the pros and cons of all of these tools. And, I often find that I'm editing so much that I sometimes would have been better off just to go ahead and just write it myself right at the start, and not have to do all of this back and forth with the thing that it's not a person anyway, like that's not the people that I'm talking to. So I wonder if, like, when you're talking about this speed thing and this pressure that we're all put on ourselves or are being put under to produce this kind of content. How do you manage that? And what are your clients telling you about this?
Yeah, I can jump in there. And okay, so you have to have systems and you have to have the tools, but there's a few hacks that you can do. One is train your tools really well. So there's a writing questionnaire that Prost had created at one point. I think it's 20 or 30 questions. And you could go through the process of answering those in your own words, just free flow writing, using that to train whatever GPT or model you're using. So I also did that with a story bank. Like, here's a list of 20 stories from my life. So it has that. And you give it feedback the first several times. And then that gets you further. I will also often reprompt and say, what about this sounds like AI? And it's often things like structure, or we all know those terms. That's like, you can't say certain terms anymore because people just assume, grammatical punctuation that, now is no longer fair game. And so I always ask it that. And then I try to go from the lens, and I work with my clients on this, is write like you speak. So if you would not say the words in that way to a friend at dinner or in a conversation like this, do not write that way. And that therefore you will be flawed and imperfect. And in the current moment, I think that, that's very, people like that because they know you're real. And then, Katja, to your point, like, if I know you're real, then I can even consider trusting you. But until I know you're not a bot, then yeah. And so letting your humanness and those mistakes come through is okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like we talk a lot about, because we talk a lot about building websites for humans by humans. And a big part of that is trying to make sure that your website still sounds like a real human wrote it, as opposed to a bot or AI or whatever. But this is a problem that's been around for decades, like since the internet started, when like the crummy, all of those shady SEO tactics, like hiding keywords and white text on a white background. It's not like this is sort of a new kind of a problem where you're trying to attract the right people. Because at the root of it, that's still what we're trying to do. We're still trying to make these connections and build these relationships. And so trying to figure out a way to make sure that our voice isn't just sounding like it's been copied from a competitor's website or a competitor's social. Because I know I used to fall into that trap a lot, where I'd see, oh, I really like how somebody did that. I think I should try to, I'm just going to redo everything in the way that, like, in echoing, let's say gently, the way that person did it, with no real, no insight into whether their stats are any good, for one thing, and without sort of, and losing that piece of my own brand voice as well. And that was, earlier days, but still, I think that is something that I do see a lot of my clients doing. When we start out with a website, especially if we're rebuilding something, we have like what they have now, and then what they have on their social, which is often not the same thing. And then as we go through the process, sometimes they will be like, well, what about this? What about, I just came across this thing. What do you think about this? And I'm like, whoa, wait. Just like Erin was just saying, if this isn't something that you would literally say, why are we adding that into the mix? But how do you check yourself with those things? What do you guys find works?
Well, and this is to your point, Erin, and I love that you said that substance is key, because and this is true with all tech, bullshit in, bullshit out. And this will never change. So if you don't have any substance, and I did the same as you, Erin, I have written a book, and it was like the first thing I fed ChatGPT with, because I wrote the book in a way, how I would actually speak. So that really helps a lot. But like the mantra that I follow really is less is more. And I'm German, so we are all about efficiency. And what I've seen And it's really, really interesting, even though it would be easy, to post and be online 6 days a week. I very consciously, and this is also what I, teach my clients, I don't do that. I very intentionally post 2 to 3 times a week. And then I always tell my clients, measure the right things. Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of, oh my God, that, post whatever went viral and it has dozens of likes and many comments, and that's nice. And of course it helps with visibility, that's for sure, but that doesn't generate any business. So the question is, it really is, how many requests do you get through your LinkedIn, for example? How many conversations are you able to start? How many relationships are you able to, start building? Because this is a process. Many people, I think they sometimes have a very unrealistic, view of what social media can do for your business. And obviously that depends on your business model and what you sell and what price point. But, again, looking at this through the eyes of a coach or consultant who sells, high-priced service packages, it's very unrealistic, that people kind of knock on your door 2 times per day and say, hey, I want to be your client. And if they do, they have a very long journey already behind them. They have been following you for a very, very long time. They might have, watched other content that you are providing. So the way, to your question, Steph, the way I deal with it really is being super intentional about how often I, post or write a newsletter and what I speak about. And this is what I teach my clients. It's all about being super intentional. And, not every business seriously requires you on social media. There are so many other channels. And I speak a lot about what I call an aligned marketing system, building an aligned marketing system that really fits your energy and the type of person you are and the type of clients you want to attract.
Yeah, because most of the people you're talking with, Katja, they're starting out, right? As entrepreneurs. They are working
both. They are starting out or they are pivoting. Because, and this is so interesting, we always think, I hear people often say when they think about a brand, this is something that you develop once and it stays the same forever. But your business, has cycles and you grow with it. And the really fun part is kind of tuning and adjusting your brand voice once you are already established, once you know very well, what type of client you want to work with, who you deeply resonate with, who, when they hear you speak or when they read something you write, they say, oh, she speaks to me. You don't know that in the beginning. Of course, you have a hypothesis and you start out and you're all excited and it's cool, but it's so much fun to kind of, work with clients who go through a pivoting phase in their business and really nail those things down. And I always say, and really uncover, what they stand for, what makes them unique and what makes them special. And people, there's so many brilliant women out there, and I don't know if some of you can relate. I'm certainly one of them. They cannot see their own brilliance. They can't. It's just tough for them.
I think there's an element of personal brand that, and I have very much experienced this, there's, we talk about imposter syndrome and that, we all know what that is. But there's also what I call invisibility syndrome, where you might be really confident in what you know, and you might have the frameworks and you might know your work is great, but you feel uncomfortable with that being visible on a bigger scale. And that was something that I've had to, work through. And when we're taking all of our years of experience and what we know and what we believe to be true, what we've learned, and we're trying to put it into something two-dimensional like a brand or a framework, or not only is it hard, not only is it really helpful to have somebody else that can kind of be a mirror and help you through that, but there's a psychological piece of putting your work on paper. And, which is a necessary step to scaling business and also putting your personality out there in your brand and your tone of voice and I think we it's very nice just to gloss over that, but I've seen when someone can really work through that, and whatever is underlying that you need to work through to be able to be really bold in how you talk about your work and how it is brought to life, whether it's through social media or newsletters or webinars or whatever, modalities you're using, like that's where you see people that are disruptive and you stop the scroll for those people. But that's not because they had some magic color combination that nobody's ever used before. It's because they've said, I am really into retro records and how those look visually. And so I'm going to make my brand have this retro recordy vibe to it, or this tone of voice of this writer I really like. And so this is my version of it. But you have to like feel psychologically safe to make that visible. And that's hard work. I think is very hard work. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's I think that ties in really well with people's websites as well, because women in particular tend to be a lot more reluctant to showcase themselves online. And that goes into the voice, that goes into the photos that they share, like it's everything around what that's going to do to their sense of self, to their sense of security, and all of it. And then there's the whole, like, you're putting it on the internet where it's going to live forever. And then people get, there's so much resistance to a lot of that. And I think one of the nice things, because we work a lot with women as well who are pivoting or they've been in business for a while. So often they've kind of already worked through some of that. But having said that, we do also support a lot of nonprofits, like smaller organizations that are like, like one of my favorites is a cat rescue group. It's a bunch of retired ladies. The last thing that they would ever want is their photo online. That's just not even on their radar, let alone something that they would be comfortable with. And so I think it's kind of it's similar to that brand, the personality kind of piece, but then trying to match up a website that's actually going to do the thing that they need it to do. Because what works on my website is not going to be the same as what works for a little nonprofit organization, or like Erin's course building, or even the brand building that Katja is doing. It's going to be different, and that makes sense. So then integrating that sort of the practical part, like what do you actually need, and what, not just you, but what do your clients actually need, and then how can you bring in this personalized thing that helps you to stand out, not necessarily disrupt the scroll like Erin was talking about, but there has to be somewhere that they land that they still have that same sense for the trust building piece. If they've been scrolling on your social or reading your newsletters or whatever, and then they land on your website and it's a completely different experience, or you're saying something different and they're going, well, wait a minute, what? Or your about page doesn't have like any information about your people. And I hate to say it, but with AI these days, firing out websites is like the overnight, like all of these bots like coming up with it, like it's bonkers out there. And we've always said it's like the Wild West online, and I'm not sure that it's getting any better. So I think we have to be a lot more intentional about the things that we're putting out there too.
Steph, as you were talking, I had the question both in terms of how you've approached this with your own brand, and then also Katja, like what do you recommend? What do you see working? Is what is the presence of the self in that, whether it's like literally pictures on your website, or eye language versus like what is the best way for someone who's kind of looking at growing their brand to, how do they fit themselves in that, and what's the right balance of that? Because I think so many of us, we've been trained to like be humble and not make it about you, but yet, trust requires spaces. It does. What you all recommend, how you've addressed it.
Katja, you go first.
Yeah, what just came up, and a client of mine just sent me that message while I'm here in the US. She said, I had a major breakthrough. I had a conversation, like a discovery call with a potential client, and you know what she said to me? Oh, you actually look exactly like I've seen you online. And that was a huge compliment, because so often, with like all those fake pictures out there, and then you meet people either online or in real life, you are disappointed because there's a mismatch. So what I always say is, before you can become visible on the outside, regardless of any channel, you truly have to look inside. And and this is what I always recommend people do. You first have to create massive clarity around who you are, what you stand for, what your values are, and what makes you special. And especially to your question, Erin, how much personality do you show? I think it depends a little bit on what kind of person you are. But one thing is for sure, and it has always been true, but now it's even more true, I find. People follow people in real life and on social media, and people want to deeply connect with other people. They want to truly connect. And in order to be able to do that, you have to show yourself. And to what extent you do that, as I said, it has to do with your personality. Myself, for example, and I wasn't born like this, but I'm very open. I had a lot of challenges that I was going through in my life. And honestly, in the first half of my career, I tried a lot to cover all of this. I just was super strong, and just now I don't have any problems. And now obviously life wanted it to be different for me, because it kind of forced me to do the exact opposite, and be very outspoken about it. And what it does create trust. And why is this the case? Because seriously, all of us are struggling one way or the other. It's just, it's just normal. I just call it life. And the more you share, and I have a mantra I follow. I always say, share from your scars, not your wounds. So that's really something that's super helpful. So, once you've worked through something and once you've had the lesson, then it's a good time to start talking about it, because it will create trust within no time. And I really encourage, my clients to share something about, their life or their career that just hasn't gone well, because it's just normal.
Yeah. But if we were talking about things that have worked, I mean, those are the kinds of things that you're not necessarily going to share on your website. Do you see, Katja, a difference in the types of things that you're sharing online, depending on where online you're sharing those stories?
I mean, obviously, a website isn't, you want to be brief, you want to be on point. It's not something where you in length share a lot of things, but you can use your website to kind of link to these resources, right? That's something you can do. I always, and I mean, this isn't, I've had tons of experience with marketing in my former life, and I was still an employee. I always challenge people to think about, what can one specific channel really do? So what is the one thing it can really do? And this is different for a website compared to whatever, a blog or a book or whatever it is.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I would say, when we were talking earlier about saying less is more, that is absolutely our approach with websites. But the thing that I find, I think one of the things that I find most of my clients find really challenging is this idea that it's a once and done. And same with the brand voice, the brand is going to evolve, so the voice is going to evolve. As founders, as our confidence grows, our voice changes and the way we can own our space changes. But the website has to evolve as well. It can't be a static sort of a thing. And the thing that I would suggest is the most effective as far as the website is concerned, and maybe even just for any online content that you make, is to keep your target, that ideal client, at top of mind for every single piece of every single word, every single whatever's on your website, because that really keeps things clear. And when we were talking about everybody's under a lot of stress, we talk a lot about cognitive load, and I've been talking about that since the pandemic, but the amount of cognitive load that all of us are operating under, never mind our customers who are browsing online, and like Erin, I think you were saying, like all of these distractions and stuff, and having to try to capture their attention. If I land on someone's website and I go, what are you talking about? What is this? Who cares? Why do I care? Like that's the piece that I think gets lost. And I think a lot of us, certainly at the start, like when I started doing web design, it was always about, what does the company need for the website? It was very rarely, what is your client doing, your potential client doing, and what is their search behavior? Are they looking for information? Are they looking for a quick purchase? Like whatever there's different, like 4 different categories of behavior search, and you probably know about this as well. But those, depending on where they are in that buying journey, determines what your website's going to do. So that from my perspective determines everything that we do on a client's website, is what is the end goal here. And also that reality perspective piece with the stats, like a conversion rate on a typical service provider website is like 3%. Like we're not like, you're not going to make $1 million online without doing a whole ton of other stuff. Like it's one piece.
You bring up a great point, because I think sometimes we want one thing to do everything. So we want if someone's using LinkedIn or Instagram, that's like all of their marketing, or that the website's going to answer every possible question. But what's actually quite a bit more effective is saying, what is the one call to action that I want this, channel or post or site or whatever to do? And then only direct them towards that, because we all make 1,000 decisions a day. And if I need to find any type of service provider, be it a dentist or a marketing firm, like if I have to make decisions when I come to their site, it's too much, And so for me, it's like, okay, from a social media standpoint, my goal is get your email, right? And then, okay, or get you on my website. And then the goal of the website, one call to action. For me, it's book a call. Let's have a consulting call. And they screen themselves out, because you need to do that too. But like really getting clear on each message and each channel, what is its purpose? What is one thing you're trying to get out of it? And then stick to that, because then not only do you significantly simplify for yourself, which makes it a lot easier to be consistent on days you don't want to be consistent, or months or weeks that you don't want to be consistent, but also it just makes it easier on their cognitive load. And if someone's in overload, we're in the emotional part of our brain. We cannot make decisions. It's literally not possible. So I think sometimes we're all looking for fast solutions, and in this world of instant gratification, we want to vibe code our website and use ChatGPT to guide our brand. And like, yes, those can get us to a certain place. There's a stage in business where that's all you can do, and that's totally fair. But it has a pretty short expiration date.
Yeah, and I think, going back to what we were talking about at the start, like where everything is starting to sound the same, because those tools are launching at incredible rates, and they're being incorporated into all of the other tools that were already pre-existing. So you can't get away from it. And it's incredibly frustrating. For me, it's super frustrating because as an accessibility advocate, we try to remove as many barriers as possible with our client websites. And when you do that, it makes it work better for everyone, and that includes search engines, and like all of the stats kind of skyrocketing. It's a beautiful thing. But like things around these vibe coding and a lot of these tools, because they're using the stuff that bubbles to the top, and the stuff that bubbles to the top, like 97% of the websites online today are not accessible friendly. 97%. So like the stuff that's bubbling to the top is the same garbage that's already out there. And the idea of just regurgitating it without using those critical thinking skills, because we're busy and we're just trying to like do all of the things, it's really risky, because then you're just putting out more of the same thing. And it's all just same. And it's a sin, really, because we know we want these connections in these relationships, right? And we know that especially for those of us who are service providers, and hopefully we sort of have some idea of what that user journey is, and that they're not coming to the website for the very first time and signing up right out of the gate. You know, they need more time to get to know who you are and figure out if you're the right person, you know? So it's an interesting sort of balance to try to find.
Where, in your experience, is how do I prioritize that? And I'm so curious, are both of you, you know, working with this exact kind of question with your customers? They know they need a website, they know they need a personal brand, and they need to have something content somewhere. Where do you get the most juice for your squeeze, you think, as a business owner? Where would you prioritize? Where would you invest first? I'm just curious what you all have learned.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I don't know about you, Steph, but it all comes down as to what you want to achieve. And then you always have to balance, like, you know, short-term wins with like longer-term, whatever strategic, a longer-term strategic vision, I'd say. So it always starts with the same question: what is it that you want to achieve now? And what is that you want to achieve, like, let's say, midterm and long term. So I have a hard time answering your question, Erin, because it really depends, right? Steph, what about you?
Yeah, I probably the same thing, honestly. Like, there's so many things that I want to do, and there's so many things that I want my business to be able to do. And you know, I just moved across the country, so my whole business structure is completely different, and it hasn't quite settled out yet. So I'm still in a transition period where I'm like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Not quite that facetiously, but like it is like, okay, this is what it is, and this is what I want to achieve. So what is the best way of getting there? When it comes to website stuff, that is a really great question, because a lot of times there's the perception of value can be really hard to communicate, because it's hard to quantify. Like, you can say, you know, oh, you're losing 25% of your online visitors without even knowing it, because it's not accessible. So that, you know, 1 in 4 people have at least one disability, you know, US and Canada combined. So then you're like, okay, so 25% of my potential people are never going to interact with my website. It doesn't matter what it looks like, doesn't matter what we say on there, because they just can't. So then what is that worth to you? You know, like, and then trying to sort of make that not sound scary, because that's the other, like, we're really not big on trying to freak people out. You know, we're trying not to do any of that yucky kind of, you know, you need to do this because of, you know, you're losing, blah 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 blah. So like, I'm not sure that I'm answering that question very clearly, but I think we all have to make a decision, and it has to be, all of those decisions that we make are based on what we think has the most value at that time, or the most potential value anyway, right?
Yeah, and to add on that, because when I look at how I run my own business, and this has certainly been a process that I've been through, I can say now what I prioritize for myself, and I help my clients get there. It's just when you just starting out, it might feel a little bit scary, but I prioritize, you know, what energetically lights me up, and I prioritize following the joy. And I don't mean, when I say that, I don't mean it's never hard. I mean, we all know it's fucking hard to be an entrepreneur. That's just the truth. But I have clearly learned from myself, you know, I can force myself to do anything I want. I just can't, because I'm a very disciplined person. But, and this can be very helpful from time to time, but I have really learned, if I go, you know, against like my own energy and my own joy, it will never work. And it's just, you know, it's nothing you learn in business school. It's a skill that you learn to really connect deeply with your body and what it's trying to tell you, and just trusting it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
so,
go ahead.
It's so beautifully said. And we do the same thing when we're looking at courses as products, you know, because differentiating yourself, whether you're a consultant or a coach or you're giving keynotes, like, there's a lot of people talking about leadership. There's a lot of people talking about integrating AI into businesses. There's a lot of people talking about coaching. There's a lot of, and there's big names and programs. And then there's, a lot of independent consultants or boutique firms. And I find so often that customers, when they come to me, they want to create something because they've seen it be successful for somebody else.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a woman the other day who was, and her LinkedIn content was around careers and career coaching. And I started talking to her, and she completely lights up when she's talking about coaching leaders and this framework that she has that I won't share her IP on the call, but it's a fun, it's like got a really nice ring to it. It makes you super curious. And she was just so excited about it. And, I understand that you want to go with pre-validated. You want as much guarantee of return on investment. We're all trying to manage our risk. We all want to pay for retirement, to help our kids, whatever those things are. And yeah, to your point, there is so much more lightness and energy and creativity when you're pursuing something that you believe to be true and believe to have joy in. And that may mean you're creating something different.
Yes.
And so when I started my company, I just believe there's so much trash learning out there. And there's all these people spinning up courses that are just wasting everyone's time and money. And I thought about that a lot. And for me, discovered that this is about actually giving a learning experience that allows someone to adopt a new habit, to truly change their behavior consistently. And what if when we designed a course, we started with that as the outcome, not, I want you to know how to create a personal brand, but the outcome is, when I see your social media content 6 months from now, and I see your newsletter, it is obvious to me that you are unique, that your point of view is so clear. When I talk to you, you're telling me about all these leads that you have coming in, like, what's the outcome? And then, okay, what are the behaviors that need to be true? What are the skills that need to be true? Okay, what do people need to know, right? And in order to, and that doesn't exist. And so I just give that as an example of sometimes, or it didn't exist until I built a framework around it. And so if following my joy was more risky, gives you, then you can create something you truly believe in, you truly think is going to make a difference. It becomes so magnetic. And also then you have the unique framework and IP and things that you're talking about. But to Katja's point, like, that starts with noticing what feels light and what feels energy giving and what feels heavy, or just like, I'm doing this because some mentor told me this was, how they made a bunch of money or whatever. But that takes a lot of audacity, I think, to do that.
It does, and to your point, that when you do that, when you truly, you follow your joy and you are courageous enough to create whatever, a course or a program that kind of embodies this. What I see make this really difficult for women sometimes is because they try to be relatable to as many people as possible. And a strong personal brand does the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's not, and I always tell them, yes, your brand voice is your self-expression, but that's only part of the story. And the other part is it's strategic self-selection. You really want to consciously exclude the most people. That's what you want to do, right? And you do that by just being, first following your joy, but then secondly being, not holding back with your convictions and what you believe to be true. And yes, it will piss people off. And that's exactly what you want to do, because it will attract the right people into your field. And this is what makes it really light.
That's lovely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I would also like to add that if you have stats to help you make decisions around what is and is not working, that can be a real I'm not going to say it's a game changer, but it's definitely taking it from being just aligning the energy and the what's enjoying stuff, but that validation piece, like to sort of say, okay, that is working really well. Like on this website, these are my top articles, my top blog posts. And does that align with what I'm already identified as being part of my strategy and my path and the things that light me up and the things that I want to do in the world? And if they don't, I need to adjust those. They need to change or be updated or removed, but I think that's another piece of that, that you're not going to hit those things right out of the gate, and they're going to change over time, and that's okay. And they're kind of supposed to. And as far as like websites go, they're built on technology. We can't even keep up with the technology changes, like how quickly everything's changing. 5 years ago, the way I talked about websites is completely different from now. And I don't expect it to be the same next year. So, we started saying things like, if your website hasn't been touched since 2024, chances are it might be time, like you can't expect to hit it out of the gate. And if you don't have those stats and the metrics that matter, not the vanity metrics, but the ones that actually do help to move the needle for your clients or for you, then you need those to set that sort of benchmark, that sort of baseline. So you can say what is working over time, and that helps to guide your decisions. It shouldn't be the only thing guiding your decision. It certainly does help.
There's two things that popped into my head as you're sharing that. So one being that I totally lost. Oh, okay. So, sorry about that. I've been going many hours today already, believe it or not. So is that I truly believe like the most competitive skill, whether you're working internally within a company or you own your own business, is it's no longer what you know, it's how fast you can unlearn and relearn. Like how quickly can you pivot a technology? How quickly can you adopt a new strategy? And then if your business involves selling what you know and your expertise, how quickly can you install that capability in a client? And what format are you doing that in? Because unless a skill is evergreen, like when I think about course creation, if I'm teaching somebody interviewing techniques or how to have difficult conversations with direct reports, like the technology available to how that gets taught, of course, is getting better and better for us, but the content itself doesn't change. So it's okay to create a course with simulations and content about that, right? But if something is more skill-based, like ethics and AI, for example, or around a particular tool, like the most annoying thing is to be taking a training on how to set something up in a tool and the screenshots are outdated. Like you have to think about when you're providing a service, and you're consuming content, like how do you do that as quickly as possible? And how do you deliver that insight in a way that actually works with how everybody is functioning now, which is completely different than 12 months ago. Right. And so that was one thought that really jumped out at me. And I can't remember what the other one was, but it must not have been that important.
Well, I think that's an awesome question, because we run a lot of care plans, we call them, so like maintenance, for websites. And so we will frequently, we will get questions from clients for like, how can I do the whatever? And I'll have to go and look it up. Like, has this changed since the last time I updated my knowledge base? Like, I'm not actually sure. Or like, we built out a whole knowledge base with like, if somebody asks this question so that the team knows, so that they don't have to ask me. But if they don't know, that they need to double check. Like, it's just like using ChatGPT. Like, if you ask the LLM how to do something, it'll spit out a bunch of instructions. If you go try to follow it, it's no different from watching a crummy YouTube video. You might get halfway through and go, that screen doesn't exist. Or, it's actually on a different paid tier. Or, oh, what do you mean I need a third-party software to integrate the thing you just told me that I could do, and I can't do it? It's so frustrating. And yeah, you just can't I don't know what the answer is, but I would say for us here at Clarity and with our clients, we definitely can't rely on one LLM to provide instructions. We definitely have to just go log in and just see. That's before we say that they could do this. Let's just go make sure that that's still the case. Because we used to provide tutorial videos for how to manage your website yourself. That's impossible. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's just it's so different, and people still have this. There's so much marketing messaging out there that anybody can build a website and anybody can manage a website, and if you can't figure out how to manage your own website, well, what are you doing running a business? And that's crazy, because this is a whole realm. Like, my industry is a realm that doesn't make sense to the majority of people out there. And the idea that like what Katja does and what Erin does, I would never be able to do that. And the idea that somebody might be able to do all of that and do all of this tech stuff is ridiculous to me.
Yes,
it is.
It really is.
I see that a lot. I get have a lot of conversations where people have created their own course and it's not working, or they're like 80% of the way there, and we're all smart. If we sat down and did nothing else, we could probably figure out how to create a simple course, or develop brand assets that we feel okay about. Like, if we would get there. But what gets in the way, before we can even take one, no one has the time to learn a completely different profession, basically, right? Which is why we have experts. But also, like, the overwhelm that comes into play of just learning the tool. So from like a course creation standpoint, often it's like, what platform do I build on? And it's like, that's like the lot, like, we don't need to ask that question for quite a while, but I think sometimes because we're smart and we're fast and we're capable and we're used to being scrappy and building for ourselves, that we forget that there's time, there's talent, and there's like mental bandwidth that are real constraints. And so just because you can figure something out, and if you spent 7 weeks in a locked room, you'd feel okay-ish about your website, like the cost of the opportunity cost of that mental, load. So I think we kind of get into this balance, and then the way that as women, I think we're programmed to be real smart with resources and make sure that everything's kind of taken care of. Like, we get into these scarcity mindsets and all. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but that's something that's just so beautiful about the power of networks and being parts of groups where people have complementary expertise and insight, and entrepreneurs that have 7 times more experience than you do, and just like finding those places. And it's like just a magical. I feel like sometimes I have conversations and with other women, and it's like they've just waved a magic wand, and now I understand, because they're telling me, like, in the 20 years that I've been building websites, like, this is what's happening. And when that trust is there, then you can kind of start to name, like, okay, I need to let this go. I am not an expert in this. This is a place for someone else to help. And
it's like what Katja was saying, right? Does that part light you up? Like, I mean, if it lights you up to go and relearn that every single time, give her. Like, when I have client calls, consultations, we're not like, you have to work with us because we're the best ones out there. We're the only ones, and we're the only ones that do it right. And that's not the case. It's not true. And a lot of times, the folks that I talk to, like, we just launched a project in the last couple of months where the business had been DIYing the website for over a decade. And the amount of stuff that she had to unlearn, you were doing it like that for the last 10 years, but it wasn't working. So, or it wasn't doing what you needed to do now. So maybe you can't keep doing it that way. maybe it's time. But it's like, I usually use the story of my dad and my first car as like the best sort of thing. My first car was an 87 Chevy station wagon. It was still the best car I've ever had. My dad, I was like, 18 or 19 or something. My dad said, if you're going to own a car, you need to know how to maintain it because you're going to be driving people around. You've got to be responsible. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. And so I could figure out how to change the oil and put in new spark plugs and change out the starter and whatever. And then now my car is a hybrid. I don't understand anything about it. It's buttons and like, forget it. I could probably figure out how to change the oil. It wouldn't be a good idea. And it would, like, I don't have the space, I don't have the tools. I certainly don't have the knowledge. There's probably YouTube videos. Gross. And I would probably break a ton of stuff and I would be mad as a hornet. Like, you would not be able to be around me. Versus, I go take it to the shop where they do that all the time. And it's like an hour. And in that hour, I'm working, doing what I do, And so I think a lot of it is that, but we're not all going to come to that place in the same path and at the same time, and that's okay. Yeah, it's identifying those things that light you up, and then what is important, and business need, and what's the best way to get you there, But the brand voice thing is the thing that's going to help you stand out from all of those other hybrid mechanics. So yeah, it is absolutely a challenge, but it doesn't get any easier, I don't think.
True, and I'm also thinking, and this again, I don't know, Erin, how you see this, because you've definitely been there. I mean, when you start a business, you can do many things yourself, and most people do. But then eventually, if you are not able, and if you don't learn, and if you don't allow yourself to have it easy and to ask for help, you won't, come over a certain threshold. It's just not possible. I think it's one of the most important things you have to learn. And I'm always fascinated how, I know women like highly capable, but they are stuck at a certain, level of revenue, $200,000. And if they don't learn to delegate and to lead themselves, they will be stuck there forever. I don't know, Erin, how did you experience this in your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. And that it makes me think of a couple of factors. Data is so helpful, Steph, as you were talking about earlier, and just unlocking the truth. And I think as women, we have this superpower that we've had the luxury as women to be in an environment where we got to have feelings, and we were taught, hey, trust your gut, and I don't think those things are specific to women. I think we've been allowed to own them and been in a world where that was acceptable. And so in business, we have like this superpower where we can look at the data, and we also can check in with ourselves, and those are both data points. But in those moments where I've had to say, okay, I need to drop this and no longer be responsible for it, the data really helps me kind of overcome the maybe instinct to save or to not spend the money. And so a great example of that, I think, is brand, in a sense that if you are visual, look more premium, buying intent goes from like 60% to 86%. People automatically assume that you have a more premium product simply by first glance what it looks like. So does it make sense to spend $10K or $2K or whatever fits your lifestyle to elevate that piece of it? Absolutely. Because the return is going to be, now you go and have a conversation and someone thinks you are more credible than they did yesterday simply because of the design or the brand voice. And so, Steph, you're talking about that as well in terms of the website, like what's happening with conversion. You're getting people, great job, your Instagram's converting people over, but you're losing them. Why is that? And that makes it really easy to make a business decision about whether or not it's smart for you to invest in something versus going, okay, I know that if I moved this dial, it would help me 5 or 10%, but it costs X amount of dollars. If I move this dial, it's going to be 20% and it costs this amount of dollars, right? And so then you start to be able to prioritize and like make a balance of logic and intuition. But I've found that like that math gives me, my inner creator, permission to flow in the way that is going to create, the most opportunity. And So yeah, I mean, for my clients, I'm like, do not go cheap on the branding of your product, because you sound like everybody else and you look like everybody else. You're wasting money. You're truly wasting your own money. So
yeah. But see, that's interesting, right? Because if they have, I think a lot of the folks that we've worked with, they never had analytics on their website, like any sort of data collection. So there was never, for them, there was never, and then if they did, it's too confusing. You know, like when you get into Google Analytics, it's like a wormhole. And so then there's no sense of, well, how is it actually doing? Like, what is it actually, what is actually happening? So there's a sort of there's no visibility there. So if you don't have visibility to, I think I'm thinking mostly around the website, but this would apply to social as well. If you don't have any visibility into how things are actually performing other than that gut check, and how would you make your decision?
Yep.
That's kind of a genuine question, because I think a lot of us just keep putting stuff out there.
I think a great a mainstream example of this, and I was talking about it in terms of the behavior changes, like say you're suddenly diagnosed with diabetes. You've been eating a certain way the last several years. Now you're diabetic. You start getting the numbers. You take your blood sugar level multiple times a day. Like you choose to use data to feel better. And I think we forget that that's actually can be applied in every part of our life and our business, and that we don't expect ourselves to suddenly learn about blood sugar in a way that our physician or our nutritionist knows. Like, it's okay to not know that about your website, but the fact that you need to know it will help you be healthier, will help you be better. That it makes me think of that. And there's more data available to us often than we think. And sometimes it's like all we can do is a surface level. And then once we have that, we can go a layer deeper. There's different ways to look at data with content marketing. I think, Katja, you were kind of alluding to this earlier, like impressions really don't matter. Leads matter.
No.
Conversion from, post to DM or post to newsletter site or whatever your one call to action is.
Yes.
Like, that's what matters. And so I think that particularly when we don't understand what those numbers mean. So like, Steph, as you were talking about the website, I'm just like, oh my God, that's me. Like, we all have our things. And when we don't understand something and we don't have any time, it can be really easy to just ignore it or push it off to later, instead of going, okay, like putting on my grown-up businesswoman hat now, and what's like the minimum lovable product or the minimum website, what that just gets me there enough. And then you just layer and you add to that over time.
Yeah, but it's interesting because with social media, which is the bane of my existence. I don't want to get into it here, but I really don't like it. So, but understanding that you need to have more than just a website, that people are going to find you from different places, that they have their own preferences, different demographics, different ages, all of that sort of thing. And if you're trying to not serve everyone, but if you want to have some visibility, there does have to be, so it's not a single leg stool, this whole thing that we do online. But with the analysis piece, because you can have all the data you want, but if you don't ever look at it, like that analysis, it's the key. And like I had a VA for a few years, and a few different VAs. And last year, at the end of the year, I looked through my LinkedIn post to see, I actually went and looked to see what actually did get the most engagement. I had never really wanted to do that before, because I was like, stupid social media. But when I looked at those, like all of the stuff, because this one VA that I had was creating a lot of stuff using AI tools, and I could see it because I see it all the time, and so I was like, no. And so on these posts, like some of them did slip past me, and you could see when you look at the data, it's extremely clear. These ones get nothing, and no wonder, because it's just the same, you can tell, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. but yeah, it's the same kind of thing. I hate the social media. So it's the last thing that I want to pay any attention to. And it takes me so much time. This is my own little vulnerability. But it takes me so much time to create the content, the visual content. This is ironic because I'm a web designer, but the visual content on social media drives me up the wall. And I find it's such a steep learning curve that I just don't want to do it. So then the whole thing turns into this like snowball of ridiculousness, and I'm creating my own problem, obviously. But there's so many things about it that just drive me mental. Whereas with the website, for me, it makes a lot more sense because I own all of that content. That's all my content. I choose the user journey, the user flow. I know where people are going to land. You know, I can control all of that. Whereas on these social platforms, all of them, they're their own business model. So they're looking to promote their own thing. Not
Again,
go ahead. The goal of social, in my opinion, should be to deplatform them as fast as possible. On whatever format, you know.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, and I like your point, Steph, about the stool. You know, it's a multi-legged stool. And I had a coach very early on who said, she's like, Erin, post once a week so you look like you're there. If someone comes and looks you up, you seem legit. You know, and that's all I did. And then there came a point in time where I was like, okay, based on my ICP and where they're active, which for me is people trying to sell their knowledge, right? So a lot of us are on LinkedIn, you know, then it makes sense, you know, to spend time on that. But yeah, I like your point. Like we do, you know, you hear all of these specialists that will say double down on, you know, social media, double down on your newsletter, double down on, and it's like, what feels good to you, what actually gets you results, and then like what do you just need to like maintain casually in case somebody goes there and then they're like, okay, this person's legit. You know, like they do exist. And that can be any number of forms. You know, like I have clients who what they have going on in YouTube is incredible, and they don't have any other social media. They don't send people to a website. They don't, or it's like very basic, you know. So I think it is like finding what works for you. And if it feels like a drag, it's never going to be efficient. It's never going to be enjoyable. And we're going to pick up on your energy of that.
Absolutely.
So it's like, okay, don't do it, you know?
And definitely like removing as many of those roadblocks. You know, if you're committed, if you're going to commit to doing it, then make it as simple as possible. And honestly, that's the same thing with websites. It's removing as much, you know, we used to call it, it's like a giant housekeeping project, like a Marie Kondo in a way. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that on like these recorded sessions, but it's most of the time when we come into websites that have been around for more than 5 years, there's a lot of content, especially if you've been adding stuff regularly. There's a lot that's no longer serving you. And the more you have that's just sort of blurring everything together, the less you're going to be visible. You know, like the less the search engines and stuff are going to surface your website because they can't figure it out either. So then it becomes sort of a bigger housekeeping project. But why did I start talking about that? There was something that I thought there was something that took me that direction. Not sure what it was. But coming back to the brand voice thing, if like, for example, we used to do graphic design in my business back when I started. It was part of that whole, I need to do all of the things because I don't know what I'm doing as a business person. So, and not being able to say no to anything. So we used to offer graphic design. And I had these blog posts because back in the day, you had a website and then you had to blog in order to get any visibility on the website, any traction at all. That was the standard advice. So I had all these blog posts. And the one that got the most traffic, like up until 2023, when I finally took it down, was what is the best, what was it called? How to size your business logo.
Oh.
There's a whole blog post about different sizes for different platforms and different, who cares? And like, nobody's going to come to me for graphic design because I don't offer that service. But I forgot about that blog post and I hadn't really like looked that deeply into my analytics for a while. And then I had to do it's housekeeping, right? I was like, well, this is getting a lot of eyeballs. Are they my eyeballs? Like, are they my clients' eyeballs? No. Can I edit this post to sort of say this is actually what we're doing now? Like, no, it doesn't. It's like there's no connection here. So we took it down, and that was great. And it felt like, oh, that was a great feeling. And that it's that data piece, right? Because I had forgotten all about that article. If I hadn't looked at the analytics, I wouldn't have known that people were still finding me there, and then they're bouncing away because nothing else that I do on the website is relevant. So you do have to be careful with these things, and you sort of forget after a while, what's there if you're not keeping an eye on it.
It's so
I think this is why it's so helpful to have both that inner clarity in this case about who you really serve and what problem do you solve for them, and combine it with data that kind of supports these decisions, because again, it's less is more.
Yeah. And if your clients are like, I mean, I've been in business now since 2015 doing this business. So there isn't a huge demographic gap yet for my clients, but there will be. But give them another 5 years, the clients that I have coming in that have Facebook now, they won't have Facebook in another 5 years, right? So
right.
And maybe a lot of them don't now, but there is this evolution in your user, your ideal client as well, unless your business is going to continue to evolve to serve the people that are the same, like to follow the same age group. And so then the way that you present your information is going to have to be different.
What you offer. I mean, think about it, like when cell phones first came out, they had one function, right? Then we could do text messaging. Then we could connect with family. Now I can be driving, order my groceries, send my kids text messages, email myself reminders, there. And so as the consumer who's hiring you for your services, world evolves and grows. If you want your offer to continue to be useful, you have to be ideally predicting it, but really good at speaking and launching fast. And in consulting, we have the saying, which is really bad, which is you only have to be 5 minutes ahead of your client. And I think that very much oversimplifies and is not true. But I think sometimes we spend all this time planning and creating this product, and it's like, no, especially in this day and age, we're all, Steph, you mentioned earlier, yeah, I'll answer your question, but I need to go look up how it works. That's just common and acceptable now, right? So it's about how do you get them the answer the fastest? How do you give them a service with the minimum emotional load on them? How do you help them make a decision? How, that, the way you provide your service and how quickly you're able to adjust, becomes the differentiator. And then the that maybe you used to be known for, whether it was design quality or amazing copywriting or whatever, those become more of a commodity. Back to the power skill is how quickly can you learn, how quickly can you pivot, whether you're working in a business or owning a business, but you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be a little bit ahead.
And be willing to flex what you're doing. I think when we were talking about how it's a lot of my clients feel like the website in particular, it's like a once and done, or like a brand strategy. We did that. Oh, that's great. That was a while ago. Maybe what's changed? Have your customers changed? Have they aged? Have they gotten younger? Are they expecting things? Because it doesn't matter how awesome your product is or your service. If it's no longer serving the next generation of customers, you're not going to be able to grow. That's for sure. So it's interesting because I think on the one hand we have a tendency to overcomplicate these things, but at the same time we kind of by using some of these tools that make us able to take shortcuts, it's almost like you're overcomplicating it or overthinking it, but then also not putting enough time and energy into a strategy for it or something. There's a gap there. And so how do we bridge that, or at least make the gap a little bit shorter is always an interesting conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So where are we at? I think we're 15 minutes left. Normally we have a few questions. I think we just have a few people here now. So if anybody wants to throw a question in the chat, you can. I think we've sort of talked about, like I had a few preliminary questions. One was around the evolution of the business, where your business evolves at a certain rate, but the website is still the older version. And so in that scenario, for the two of you, because Erin, you would have people that create courses where the content doesn't sound like the creator anymore. And Katja, that whole pivot is like your whole jam, right?
Mhm.
So what would you say to someone? Like, do they have to start over from scratch? Can they update it? What would your answer be to that?
Well, especially if you have an existing business, I would never recommend to tear everything down. I mean, this can be, this can make sense just for very few people, but I think, and that's the beauty if you think about building your brand voice or like developing your brand voice when you already have an existing business. I think many people kind of grow up and think they have, when they start their business, they have to have it figured out. But I think the more experience you have, the clearer you are on what are the patterns that I recognize, what are the clients I truly enjoy working with, what is it that truly gives me energy. And once you have all these insights, what I then usually do is that, and it's more like a revolution, more like an evolution than a revolution. We again look inside to uncover what are the values you hold for yourself and your business, what are the unique strengths you bring to your business, what is it that you are here to do, and then all of this can be translated in like the next version of your brand voice. So you can 100%, and you should build on everything you've done before. And then, the customers come in and you do some market research with them. I always do that. I love it because I always say, we can have so many ideas, but it's our customers that really tell us what works for them and actually what they need. I'm a huge fan of co-creation. I really am. I've never launched anything, and I never recommend my clients do this, launching anything without doing customer research and co-create with the client.
Nice.
For me, Steph, I think of it as, so we've been in this house about 5 years, and I was telling my husband this morning, like, stuff's just starting to break. Like door handles screws have to be tightened, and doors are starting to, and so I think of things in the business that way, that you build them and they are good, they get you to a certain point, but then you do have to refresh. Like, you don't have to redo your kitchen 5 years later, but 20 years later, like, probably, and you might have to swap out some appliances at year 7, whether you like it or not, because of various things. Or, and when we delay making those investments, it's like you're hearing the noise in the car and you're like, oh, I'm going to take that in next week. And then you're driving to the airport to catch a flight to meet with a client. Not that I've ever experienced this. And your car breaks down and you don't make your flight because you didn't take care of, so now all of a sudden something's an emergency, because your website's down right before you walk on stage at a big conference or something, so I think it's like anything in life, that there are definitely moments where you can band-aid and delay or just do a little bit, but just like things in life that we use on a daily basis, whether it's our laptop or our house or our car, like you do have to do an overhaul. You do have to do a replacement at some point. And I think when you're working with good advisors, they can kind of help you see that breakdown on the freeway coming before you do, because you may not realize that that particular sound is like a really bad sound versus like there's a rock in my tire and I don't know that that's what it is, So I think that's something where people are unsure. If you can find good partners who aren't going to just try to sell you something for the sake of selling you something, that can really guide you long term. I think that that's so powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think it's hard with that, the rebuild versus the refresh is there's some language around that that's really interesting. Like people have different interpretations of what that means, and which is just a little aside. But as far as websites go, yeah, like it's interesting because if they're built to be really simple and clear and like clean code, they tend to last a lot longer than the stuff that's like built and like everything is, got a bunch of trendy things. Not unlike the house analogy, so that's kind of interesting too, to sort of keep in the back of your mind, so that if you can try to resist adding a bunch of stuff just because somebody said, some bro out there was like, oh, you need the chat bot, or you need the ticker tape slideshow thing, or whatever. If you can try to avoid adding all of that stuff just because somebody told you to, and make sure you're just adding the stuff that your client is actually going to appreciate having there, it does make it easier to avoid the big overhaul. But there's no guarantee because it's tech. So, whatever. Okay, so maybe we've got time for one more question. This is okay. So I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I want to sound warm and human, but I also need to be taken seriously as a professional. How do I balance approachability with credibility from a brand voice kind of a perspective? And I'm just curious to hear what you both would say about this, because I think you'd have really interesting perspectives. Or did I throw that in too late in the game? Do we have time to?
I think we do, but Katja, you got to go first on that one, because you see it. I mean, that's your world, right? Like helping people find that balance. So I'd love to hear what you think.
What I recommend my clients do, and it sounds very simple, but they really tend to forget when it comes to the credibility piece. It is important to really share like the work you do with your clients, and this can be through a written testimonial, it can be through like in whatever, a case study you do, and you have to do this consistently. It's one of the things that kind of not only gives you credibility, but that also increases trust, because people can see, oh, she is actually helping people and she's not only talking about it. So that's one piece. And then obviously, like many of the people I work with, if they are starting out now or have already an established business, they've had a career before. And usually when they build a business, that sort of builds on the career they had before. And sometimes they think, what I did before has nothing to do with what I'm building right now. And I don't think this is true. What you've done before is exactly, what got you where you are today. And telling that story again and again, how what you've done might have done before in your corporate career has helped you build that business you have today and help the clients you help today, is something you can and should reiterate, if it makes sense, of course, right? If it makes sense. And then when it comes to that, I was laughing because I remember when I was still in corporate, I got a feedback once, oh, Katja, you smile too much. It stuck with me, right? Until I understood that's just me. I just have a very warm and loving personality, and that has nothing to do with people, not trusting me or not respecting me. It's just who I am. And I always recommend that people really truly own who they are, no matter what others say.
I love that you got that in feedback, because for me, I think how I really started to understand my personality and my voice in terms of how that shows up professionally was in an exit interview that HR did of someone who had worked for me. And she described me, she's like, was just saying lovely things, Erin's so comforting and helpful and nurturing. And then she says, but don't get me wrong, she's ferocious in the sense of,
Yes.
and I was like, yes, like that's me. I am like fiercely loving, you know, and I'm going to show up both of those energies as big as I can, and they balance each other. But that also means that I'm not going to compromise, you know, a client's success to protect their feelings, but I'm going to try to be really supportive and nurturing in the way that I, you know, guide them. So whether it's coming from feedback conversations or asking your friends, like, how would you describe me, or your kids or your mom, or like people who aren't going to be filtering through this like professional lens, like those can spark things that really you can then start to own. Like, you know, I'm Katja and I smile a lot, you know, like fantastic. Right? Like, you know, double down on those things that are you, and but they can come in like the most unexpected places, and from other people, I found.
Yeah, I like that. And I would say I would throw in as well that this idea of like what is a professional persona isn't necessarily a definition that's been written by women. Certainly not by professional women. I think there's still this sort of patriarchal kind of approach or interpretation of these things. And I think it behooves us women to give that the treatment it deserves, and just focus in again, because it's about what is helping you to stand out. So as entrepreneurs, at least, because I can't speak to HR and corporate kind of world because I've never actually worked in that world, but so that I think that's a whole other kettle of fish. But for entrepreneurs who need to show up in a certain way, by a certain way I mean like in a way that's different from everybody else, I think we really do, like you said, Katja, we have to own this, and we have, and you're not going to get that out of the gate either, but it does come over time. It gets a little bit easier.
Hello, friends. I just want to let you know that you're at time.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys would like to throw in at the last moment? Anything you think was?
I feel we've covered a lot. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much to both of you. So this was Katja and Erin. We were going to drop the links in the chat, but I think we'll send them in the email. And if any of this resonated with anybody watching this recording, and you're thinking about your own website, I do host a follow-up, a little webinar in a couple of weeks, and we go through some real examples with some before and afters, because we like data, and so we'd like to sort of show these things. So we'll put that link in the follow-up email as well. But meanwhile, thank you so much to Katja and Erin. I really appreciate your time, and for Kimberly and Catherine and anybody else who does watch this. It's just great to have these conversations and to help get some really good practical useful knowledge out there.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.